Hi Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I want you to be more confident in the kitchen, and part of that confidence comes from knowing how to tell if our produce is still good or not, and how long will that produce last? How do I store it at home, like in my kitchen, to make it last for as long as possible? If you can answer those questions, then you're probably feeling a little bit more confident in the kitchen. So today I am going to run over not every single specific ingredient, like fresh fruit or vegetable that you've ever bought, and exactly how to store each and every one. I'm going to share tips for general groups, and that should help you to know how to store your fruits and vegetables better. We're also going to talk about the seasonality, and I know you're not going to remember everything that I say. So I have put this information into a downloadable PDF, actually a couple downloadable PDFs. This is something that a lot of people have asked me over the years, and so I've been working on putting together this guide. The thing that always stopped me though was, how do I organize it? How is it the most useful for users? Like, is alphabetical better because it's easy to find specific ingredients, or should I group them by seasonality? So like all of the summer veggies together. Does it make more sense if I group it by like the way that you store them? So there's those different groups. Or about how long they last. So it could go from like the quickest to spoil to the ones that stick around for the longest. And because I couldn't ever really decide, I just made all of these. So if you go down to the description in the box below, there's a link to a page, and you can download all of them if you want to, or whichever one you feel like is organized in the way that makes the most sense for you. So there's ones for vegetables and then ones for fruits, and there's guidance in each of these, like papers. It's the same information, it's just organized differently. So you're not missing out on anything if you only download one. Okay, so if you are super curious about the seasonality of different fruits and vegetables, well, because YouTube, typically anybody from anywhere may be watching this video, it is really hard for me to nail it down for you, because people in the southern hemisphere are in different seasons than people in the northern hemisphere. And depending on, the type of climate you live in, the types of fresh fruits and vegetables that are available are going to be very different. So the guides that I put together are based on like United States typical seasonality. The reality is our world is so interconnected now, and we can get fresh produce from so many different parts of the world nowadays. It is really nice that we can still access a lot of different ingredients year round. So whenever you're talking about the seasonality of things, you definitely may be able to access that ingredient outside of its main season. It's just that during that main season, it'll probably be a little bit more flavorful, and kind of like the best of that ingredient. And so moving on from seasonality to more storage considerations. Before I get into talking about certain groups of ingredients, I will say that where the food is merchandised in the store is probably going to give you a clue as to how you should store it at home. And you also want to take into consideration ripeness with that. So an ingredient might be sitting out at room temperature, like in the middle of the produce department at the store, because it's waiting to get ripe. And so when you bring it home, you can store it on the countertop, maybe in a fruit bowl or not in a fruit bowl. If it is a fruit bowl, make sure there's plenty of air and space around it, but I digress. You can leave it on the counter until it gets ripe, but then if you aren't ready to eat it the day it gets ripe, you can then move it into the fridge to try to stretch how long it's going to be good for. So definitely take some clues and cues from how food is merchandised. And let's jump right into fruits. So, with fruits, there's a few different, I would say, broad categories. Citrus, berries, tropical fruits, and stone fruit. And then, there are maybe a few other, I don't really know exactly where grapes would fall within that. Grapes are almost a berry, but not quite as delicate as berries. So these groups don't necessarily encompass every single fruit you'll ever come across, but these are the ones that I am going to talk about. So citrus fruit is one of those that you almost always see merchandised at room temperature. You can leave citrus out at room temperature until it's ripe, and then you can put it in the fridge if you want. Really the one main issue or concern you want to think about with citrus is you don't want to put it in a damp, humid spot. So if your crisper drawer of your fridge tends to be very humid, you might want to avoid putting the citrus in that crisper drawer. You also don't want to put 4 oranges in a plastic bag together and tie it close so that it can't breathe. You want your citrus to be in mesh bags if they're going to be in a bag, or you can just store them not in a bag at all, but you want them to have plenty of air space around them to lose some of their moisture, and you don't want them to end up in a super humid environment because they will mold more quickly. As with all fruits and vegetables, once it is cut, you need to save that in the fridge. Before you cut your citrus fruit, you can totally keep it on the countertop, but if you do cut it, do put it in the fridge. The reason for that is because whenever you cut into it, you are exposing all of that moisture to the air, and bacteria and mold can land from the air, and the moisture that is on that citrus fruit will give that bacteria a place to grow and thrive. So you want to keep it in the fridge after it is cut. And you could say, okay, well with citrus, a lot of times the pH might make it a little bit more difficult for bacteria. Yes, absolutely. Very true. However, it's not a crazy enough pH difference to make the environment completely unlivable for bacteria and mold and things. So it might not spoil as quickly, but it will still spoil, so you do want to get it in the fridge. And then with berries are pretty fragile. Berries really aren't going to last too long, so whenever you buy fresh berries, do try to eat them up as quickly as you can. Berries are going to be best in the refrigerator for the most part. So with the berries, a lot of times it's best practice to, when you get them home, rinse them and then let them dry, and then put them in a food storage container that is sealed, airtight lid or a resealable silicone bag, something like that, and get that into the refrigerator. If you rinse them as soon as you get them home, number one, it makes them easier to just grab a few and eat them. But number two, you can rinse away some, any debris and things that may not have been rinsed from the field to the grocery store. It is important to let them dry because that moisture is a breeding ground for mold, and you don't want your blueberries or raspberries to mold any quicker than they already do. So rinse them, let them dry, and then get them in the refrigerator. Tropical fruits is a pretty broad and diverse group of fruits. You can go anywhere from kiwi to star fruit to bananas would be considered tropical fruits, pineapple. So for the most part, tropical fruits can stay out on the counter until they're ripe, and something like a mango, you're going to be able to tell that whenever by touch, by texture. So when you squeeze it, you want it to give a little bit without being mushy, and that's when you know it's ripe. And so something with a pineapple, scent is a big one for pineapple. With kiwis, again, you're gonna go for a touch for it. Banana, you can usually see on the skin. When it starts getting brown, it's inside is definitely ripe and very sweet. And then, you know, like guavas and papayas and star fruit and dragon fruit, all of these other fruits, for the most part, countertop until they're ripe. And honestly, how often do we buy tropical fruit? And like, if you're anything like me, you're so excited to eat it, you can barely wait for it to get ripe anyway. But if it gets to that point and you aren't gonna eat it yet, pop it in the fridge. As with everything else, if you do cut into it, put the cut pieces into the fridge. Whenever you are storing tropical fruits in the fridge, you also do not want these to like be in a sealed plastic bag that will keep moisture inside. They are also good in a mesh bag similar to citrus. And then stone fruits, so like your peaches and apricots, and then cherries are even included in stone fruits. Fruits that have a pit in the middle. These again, well, okay, peaches and plums and apricots and nectarines, definitely keep these on the countertop until they are ripe. If you want to speed up that ripening process, you can put them in a paper bag. This is gonna help trap a little bit of the ethylene gas, and that will help it ripen quicker. So if you do put your peaches in a bag, or any of these stone fruits in a bag to ripen, keep a close eye on them, like probably check them every day, because they could go from unripe to much more ripe than you were hoping for pretty quickly. Once they are ripe, you can put them in the fridge and make sure that it's well ventilated so that there is no, you know, it's not the right environment for mold growth. And with cherries, even though they are a stone fruit, I typically treat them a little bit more like the berries. So I like to rinse them when I get them home, dry them, and then store them in the refrigerator. Now I would say with cherries, it's not quite as important to have them in a sealed container. It's not quite as important as it is with berries, but you can do cherries in like a food storage container. Just make sure that they are dry before you put them in there so that you don't get a bunch of mold growth really quickly. And I skipped over melons. Melons like watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, those types. These typically we leave on the countertop more for space reasons, because they can get quite large. So you absolutely can put them in the refrigerator, but if space is kind of inhibiting that, you can leave them on the countertop. If they are already ripe, ready to cut into, but you don't have time to cut into them, you could change your a cooler into a makeshift refrigerator. So you can put some ice packs in there, put the big watermelon in there. Maybe you're taking it on like a picnic the next day or something. So if you need to do that overnight or something, you could, consider changing or using a cooler. As with everything else, once you slice into it, be sure to get it into the refrigerator so that it stays safe to eat. So if you have any questions about fruits, maybe specific fruits, or if you've noticed anything that works well in your kitchen, drop it in the comments below. And we're gonna move on to veggies. And I would say there's probably more groups of vegetables that we could talk about than there are fruits. There's also a lot more exceptions to the groups. Veggies just are a little bit more fickle when it comes to storage. So I am definitely not going to list off all 45 vegetables that I have in this guide. And I do just want to say the 45 vegetables in this guide are not every single vegetable out there. My hope is that these are a solid 45 that aren't too overwhelming, and then when you have a vegetable that's kind of close, you can pick the veggie that is closest to you and store it in a similar way. So when we go over these veggies here, I'm gonna, instead of going by necessarily groups of veggies, I'm just gonna talk more about the things that you want to think about whenever you are going to store these vegetables. That way it's less of a memorize this storage method for that and more of a ask yourself these questions, and hopefully that will get you storing veggies in the right place. If that sounds like too much work, just download the PDFs in the link in the description below. Okay. So for ingredients like fresh herbs like parsley and cilantro, and then also included in this is like asparagus, your best bet is to, most of the time when you get it home, trim off the ends. So like your parsley, just snip the ends of the stem. Asparagus, you can snap or chop off the ends there and put that upright in a glass of water. Cilantro and parsley and asparagus are very like water loving, and they're going to lose their quality because they're going to lose their moisture. So you want to allow those stems, the cut edge, to be able to absorb as much moisture as possible. So that's why we put them in a glass of water. Like the leaves would be up here out of the glass of water, and then put that in the refrigerator. Replace that water every day that you are keeping them, and especially for like leafy herbs, they don't last too long. So if you know you aren't going to be able to cook with them, consider like putting them through a food processor or blender or some kind to make a sauce, and maybe you can even freeze that sauce to preserve those herbs for even longer. And there are other ingredients that also really love moisture, and your like big enemy is going to be the loss of moisture. However, they don't necessarily need to be in a glass of water. There are others where you can like get a damp paper towel and wrap the ingredient in that damp paper towel and then put it in like a reusable silicone bag. An example of that are green onions or scallions. Another example are turnips. And then kind of one step further than that, there are ingredients where as they lose moisture, that can make other parts of the ingredient mold or spoil quicker. So the best thing you can do is have a paper towel, a dry paper towel, around that ingredient to help catch the moisture, so that instead of it staying and sitting on the food, it goes into your paper towel. And then with that, you can have that in like a airtight food storage container or a sealable silicone bag with the paper towel. So lettuces are a great example of this, whether it's like romaine or spinach or like a spring mix. Having a paper towel to help it's almost like wicking away the moisture in a way. Super helpful. Also for ingredients that have kind of like a bulb and then leafy part, you can, whenever you get it home from the store, trim the bulb away from the leafy part, and then you'll store the leafy in the paper towel method, the dry paper towel method. So ingredients like fennel, daikon, beets, that kind of leaf bulb, you want to store them separately. Right. So like Swiss chard, collard greens, kale, just a lot of these, leafy greens, along with radishes. This works well for radishes. Also, and mushrooms. That might be a little bit of a surprising one. But yes, mushrooms, having that paper towel in there can help extend the life of the mushrooms a little bit. And then there are ingredients that you want to keep away from the light. These are mostly like root vegetables. It's like potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, and garlic. So alliums and potatoes. These will keep a long time at room temperature. Slightly cooler than room temperature is best, yes, but you do want to keep them out of the light because the light may cause them to sprout more quickly. So keep your potatoes and onions and things like that out of the light, but also in a well-ventilated area so that, again, you don't get too much moisture loss, which could then turn into mold growth. Cooler area if possible, and not the most humid part of your home. Another ingredient that is better to keep out at room temperature instead of in the refrigerator is tomatoes. And especially when your tomatoes are not ripe yet, which the vast majority of tomatoes at the grocery store are not ripe yet. If you can grow tomatoes at home, kudos to you, because they're so much more flavorful when you get them out of your own backyard. But when you get them from the grocery store, typically they are not ripe, and you want them to have as much time as possible to get ripe before you need to use them, so keep them on the countertop. And if you put them in the fridge, a lot of times like the flesh of the tomato will kind of get mealy. Like there is a texture difference that happens when the tomatoes are in the fridge. So too cold of temperatures for some ingredients actually can kind of hurt the quality, and tomatoes are one of those. So what about like cabbagey, cruciferous brassicas style veggies. These veggies from the cabbage family are fairly hardy. You do want to keep them in the refrigerator. You don't want to leave them out at room temperature because the leaves will lose their moisture, and they'll do that quicker at room temperature. So keep them in the fridge. That will help keep them a little bit more firm and crisp. However, you do want to make sure that they're ventilated appropriately. So you don't want to rinse these before putting them in the fridge. You want to rinse these right before you use them. It's because the moisture, when you rinse them, the moisture can get so deep in like the different crevices and like areas between the leaves that it's really hard to get them dry. And then they could end up like molding and spoiling more and getting slimy, kind of mushy really quickly. So don't rinse them, just get them in the fridge. Just make sure that if you see them in a plastic bag and there's like a lot of moisture around the plastic bag, then move it to a different bag or keep it in a food storage container with a lid. Broccoli and cauliflower, again, do not rinse those before you get them in the fridge because it's really hard to get them dry enough, and then they'll sit in that moisture. And I'm sure you're seeing a theme here, right? There are some veggies that adding moisture, ensuring that the moisture stays is important, and then there are others where you really don't want an accumulation of moisture. And I'll just rapid fire a couple other random veggies. So bell peppers, sometimes you'll get them from the store in like a plastic bag. There's like 3 of them, right? If you store them in that bag, be sure to open it, or you can put them in like a mesh bag instead. You just don't want them in any sort of like sealed container before you cut them. Pretty similarly to that are like zucchini and summer squash. Those also, they don't have to be in a bag at all, but if they are, I would recommend maybe a mesh bag over a silicone or plastic bag, and definitely do not seal that bag. Cucumbers can fall right in there with how you would treat a zucchini. And then like butternut squash, acorn squash, those like more autumnal, wintry squashes, those you'll keep on the countertop. Definitely until they're ripe, until you cut into them. Once you cut into them, get them in the refrigerator. But those squash, they're one of the ones that can be hurt by too cold of temperature. You want to avoid keeping those in the fridge. Like sugar snap peas, green beans, like Italian beans, all of those kinds. Don't rinse them until you're going to use them. So when you get them home from the store, don't rinse them right away. Again, because these ones are another ingredient that's quite sensitive to too much moisture, and you'll see mold growth more quickly. So don't rinse them. Put them in the refrigerator. So if you buy them already in a sealed plastic bag, that's fine. But once you open them, go ahead and transfer them to like a food storage container and somewhere where maybe there can be a little bit more airflow. The worst thing you could do is take that plastic bag and like mush it down to make it like as small as possible, because when you do that, you're just, any moisture that the beans or peas lose, you're not giving it anywhere to go, and therefore they will get slimy and mushy quickly. And if you buy fresh corn at the store, be sure to keep the leaves, the corn husk, around that corn until you are ready to cook it. Do not rinse it before putting it in the fridge. Just, you've got your nice husked corn, toss it in the fridge. Before you're ready to cook it, then you can peel it and rinse it at the same time, and then get it on the grill or in the boiling water, or however you're going to cook your corn. So I know that I did not talk about every single ingredient specifically, but if you take this guidance and you think, okay, so this vegetable that I have in front of me, it has like a really thick skin, so it's not going to lose much moisture. Or it has super duper thin skin and it is like a very juicy type ingredient. So I need to be careful about how much moisture it is going to lose and think about, okay, how do I ensure that that moisture doesn't just hang around and allow it to get mushy and slimy? Or, okay, this ingredient is like a lettuce, you know, like a light leafy green type texture. I need to keep paper towel around it to wick that moisture away versus just keeping it in like a well-ventilated area, because it is something more like a bean, like a sugar snap pea. It has like a skin, but it's moist, but it has a skin. So you just need to keep it well ventilated. But the leaf is pretty thin, and therefore you want to get a paper towel, a dry paper towel with it to wick that moisture away. Versus this vegetable, its number one enemy is going to be moisture loss, so I need to put it in a cup of water or keep it wrapped in a damp paper towel in order to keep it nice and crisp and fresh. So I hope that this guidance in this video has helped you. I will mention it one more time. If you want a nice organized list of ingredients and the seasonality and about how long they'll last when you get them home and the best way to store them, head to the link in the description box, and that will shoot you over to a page where you can download a PDF based on the type of organization that works best for you, alphabetical, the type of season, the way in which you're going to be storing it. Thank you, Chefeteers, so much for joining us for this July bonus. And if you are picking like produce out of your gardens, this might come in super helpful for how to store that, because sometimes whenever we grow stuff, we are super excited that we get a lot, but sometimes like there are harvest days where you're just like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do with all of this stuff or how I'm gonna store it. So hopefully this will help you store it so that you can eat on it even longer and enjoy your homegrown produce for as long as possible. If you want to get more confident in the kitchen, learn more cooking tips and ways to prepare and care for your food, be sure to subscribe. And if you know somebody who you think would like this information, send this to them, please and thank you. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. And because this is a bonus video, I kind of interrupted my every other week schedule. So I'll see you next week for regularly programmed July show, for our regularly programmed every other Wednesday video. All right, thank you so much, Chefeteers.